Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are watching Off the Track, and it is time to drop the hammer.
Well, it feels great to be back in the studio. Welcome back to episode number 17 of Off the Track, our dirt track racing podcast where we talk about our experiences in the sport. I'm your host, Tanner Holmes, 17-year-old sprint car driver from Southern Oregon. And to my left, I have my best friend and co-host, Bennett Gooch. Bennett, what's been good lately?
We've just been hanging out, getting ready to put on a PRCA rodeo that my family helps out at the Reading Rodeo. I bought a new car. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And we also just interviewed an awesome guest, if you want to let them know who it was.
Yes, today we interview Daison Pursley from Keith Kunz Motorsports. We were able to bring him in over a video chat, so you guys will be able to see him during the interview. But in a couple of our recent episodes, we talked about, micros a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it, and I was like, man, we should try to get someone that has came up through the micro ranks and been successful in the sport of dirt track racing for the viewers, because if you guys watch the YouTube channel or you watch, the first 16 episodes of the podcast, you hear us talk about outlaw karts.
We're kart kids.
Bennett and I are kart kids. We race up and down the West Coast, from Northern Oregon to Central California at many different racetracks and try to travel and hit all the big shows. So that's where we kind of grew up racing.
Another funny, just a quick mention, I don't know if this is true or not, this is kind of the way I see it, is when you grow up, you're either an outlaw kart kid or a micro kid. There's really not an in-between.
Those are the two main ways of getting started.
I don't really see someone running both that often until maybe open division when you're, in the 500 cc a little bit older, but I don't really see too much
A couple
mixing.
kids cross over, but for the most part, some, if they're trying to go up through the ranks, you run karts into sprint cars or you run micros into sprint cars, and it really just depends, what area of the United States you're from. But we were kind of bouncing around, who should we get on? And I thought, what, Daison Pursley, he would be a great example. He got into micros around the age of 10 years old and then ran it right into, becoming a driver for Keith Kunz Motorsports and now in the Toyota pipeline, on his way to making a career out of racing. So we interview him today for about 30 minutes. You are going to hear about all of that. Let's roll into the interview. So joining us here today on episode number 17 of Off the Track, I think besides my younger sister, he's our youngest guest on the show. He came up through the micro ranks. That was his pathway in dirt track racing, and one of the main reasons we wanted to have him on, and now he drives for Keith Kunz Motorsports in the 71. Daison Pursley, thank you for joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I always enjoy doing these podcasts.
Absolutely. So to start off, you guys have already ran a bunch of races. I mentioned running for Keith Kunz Motorsports. In one of those first events, you ran the Tulsa Shootout and then right into the Chili Bowl. And that was actually your rookie year at the event. Can you just talk about how that experience was?
Yeah, so I've always, been to the Chili Bowl since I live in Oklahoma and close to that building and whatnot. So, going there and seeing the building was nothing new to me. So I guess you could say it was, not my rookie, going there at least, and then racing, actually being in getting in a driver's suit, it was my rookie year. So of course this year with COVID and everything, it was a little bit different, but it was still cram packed and probably still the biggest crowd I've ever raced in front of, and going down the ramp and making that right turn onto the track is pretty special, and to finally able to do that is pretty cool. And to do it with a team like Keith Kunz Motorsports is something I'll cherish forever, and I'm sure extremely thankful for.
Do you remember your first thoughts going down, when you're actually firing off for the first time on the track? What were your first thoughts behind the wheel?
Yeah, so the first, we get hot laps on Monday, so, there's still people there, but then there's not as much people as, later in the week or on your prelim night. So that was my first time firing off, and, like I said, I've been there, so I don't think I really took it all in yet. And then when I fired off for hot laps on Tuesday night on my prelim night, that's when I felt like it all, really sank in, and the nerves started coming to me, and it you finally realized that, you were at the Chili Bowl and you were racing in front of all these people.
One of the things you really touched on was, having that prior experience, not only behind the wheel because you ran the Tulsa Shootout and also just sitting in the grandstands watching. How beneficial was that for you to, have been there before, but also, it wasn't like some of these kids, when they make their first Chili Bowl start, they maybe just go out there and run their first ever laps in a midget, but you had already ran some prior races with KKM. How much did that help you into, eventually winning the rookie of the race, this season?
Yeah, I feel like, of course it helps a ton. Seat time never hurts in any car. So, to be that young and then still have, I think, of 2 years in a midget before I even stepped in that building is really cool. And like I said, I'm extremely thankful for, that Keith let me do it at a young age, and all the people and partners that have helped me do it at a young age. So, to have, prior experience before I even stepped in that building, and then, touching on for people that haven't really ever been to the building, for me, it wasn't such as like a starstruck feeling when I walked into that building, to see all the cars and to see how big the building is. And, I've ran on that track in micros and whatnot. So it wasn't nothing new, just, a lot more people in a different car for sure.
So when you go there for the first time and you actually run the track, was it everything you kind of imagined, or was it just like, this is just another track? Because I know a lot of people have different opinions on this, actually.
Well, and also you ran there on iRacing.
Right,
It's
right.
one of the tracks, that you ran some laps on there. We always see you running iRacing. So yeah, like he said, how was it?
It's just everything happens a lot quicker than you would imagine. Like, we do run, smaller tracks like Port City, Beauclair, and Macon in the midget side, but it's still very, very surprising. A lot of people say that the lights kind of mess with you, but I didn't have an effect on the lights, for me anyways. And, everything just, like I said, happens way faster than you imagine. And if you get on the berm, that was another thing that I had to realize. And the berm really upsets the cars there. And that's something that, like in micros, that I've ran there past, you can lean on the berm pretty hard. And then the midgets, it got you really upset and kind of shot you out to the slick where you couldn't really exit off the bottom like you wanted to. So just, little things like that. I felt like I could have done better in, and maybe even better our results. But, overall, I'm, happy with getting the rookie of the race.
Absolutely. So after Chili Bowl, your guys' season kind of ramped up, and I guess going into 2021, unlike 2020, it was looking a little bit more normal. A lot of races on the schedule for your guys' whole team. Started down in Ocala, and then you got going. Can you just touch on how your season's been? I know you've picked up a couple victories, one down at West Memphis, and then also one recently at Green Valley. So a good start to the year with already a couple wins, this early in the season.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like, this early in the season, I think we've ran 15 races, maybe even if that, and to have, I think we have 60 to 70 on our schedule, so it is still pretty early in the season, and to knock off 2 wins is pretty cool. And there's been a lot of seconds to, you guys might know him, Buddy Kofoid, my teammate. So it's not bad running second to him, as long as it's our teammate and Keith Kunz is still running. But yeah, we've knocked off a lot of podium finishes, and consistency is definitely key to winning championships, as a lot of people know. So, extremely thankful for that, and that we're doing that. Cars have gotten a lot better here soon. Like, I feel like we've struggled at Ocala, and Buddy ended up winning, and then I think me and him were in the top 5 both nights. So to have places that Keith Kunz Motorsports has struggled, and then, kind of picked up the results here this year, especially so far, is pretty cool. And then I think another track we struggle at would be Port City, and we were able to, I think I had a 1 DNF and then finished 11th or so after hitting an infield tire after battling for the lead. So we had the speed, just couldn't put it all together for 50 laps and 30 laps, that's very unfortunate, but nothing to hang your head about with the USAC guys. So, like you said, season has been really good, 2 wins so far, and still got to get that first USAC win. That's definitely something that I want to get. And I guess you could say I won at West Memphis, but it wasn't a national race, so I don't think I would count that. But it did still pay $3,000, so that was pretty nice.
So you mentioned they're finishing second to Buddy, who we both race with at Red Bluff. What's that like racing with your teammates? Because you have a lot at Keith Kunz Motorsports. What's that like in the pit side, just interacting with them and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's cool. Just because, they see different things than we see, if they're running with us or running behind us, and they can kind of see what we're doing wrong or see what we're doing right. And, to have that many cars is definitely, I feel like, a benefit because, say if they're in a B main or in an earlier heat race than you can always talk to them and see what the track's doing or see how their car handled, because every time the cars go out, they're pretty much identical. It's usually up to the driver to drive them. So, to kind of just, that aspect is really cool. And then me and Buddy have became really good friends. So for someone like him to have that much experience in a 410 sprint car and then be good in a midget, it's really cool to lean on him. And then I leaned on Cannon a lot last year when he was a Keith Kunz Motorsports member, and just because he's from Oklahoma and I knew of him. So that was kind of cool. And then like I said, this year I've leaned on Buddy a lot since I'm still younger, but a lot of people in Keith Kunz Motorsports call me the veteran because I've been here the longest. So that's pretty weird to hear, but I think I'm, still a rookie in a lot of aspects. So, just kind of, keep on proving, and, Keith Kunz Motorsports guys right now are doing a really good job. We're all pretty young, and, but he's probably the oldest one. Yeah, he is the oldest one. So that's kind of cool to be running with him and whatnot. But, it's cool to have that many crew guys and, drivers and lean on each other to, progress as a team.
That's cool.
That's neat. Yeah. And another thing to touch on that you guys have really been doing this season, not only focusing on the midgets, but also KKM has put together a pretty solid micro program to help develop the drivers. And you've been one of the main people kind of leading that. So how has it been also to, I know the midget and the micro are probably completely separate, but there's some similarities, but to still be able to go and win with that, that's got to be a confidence booster just to be able to run any laps in anything, on a night at the racetrack.
Yeah, and especially, run any laps to anything is really good, just like you said. But to have somebody like Keith Kunz kind of almost step down into micros and still getting knowledge from him is really cool. For younger kids, say if, their parents wanted to get them in a good car, a Keith Kunz micro is going to be a really good car to get your kids started in. So, in aspects like that, and, I was very fortunate enough to run micros earlier in my career. And then it's pretty cool to see him step down and go to places like Port City and around Oklahoma. It's exactly where I grew up to kind of give other kids chances, to show their talent and everything, which is really cool, I think, but, sometimes it could honestly hurt you. I feel like too, if you get some kid that really, doesn't know what he's doing or anything, and then you'll waste a couple of years, but that's just part of it, I guess. And, he's doing a really cool thing, I feel like, with the micros to give those kids a chance where their, parents don't have enough money or whatnot, and he'll pick them up and start them at a younger age and progress them into hopefully superstars one day.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And that's a good little segue into our next part of the episode, talking about your story. Because I know yours is maybe a little bit different. You didn't necessarily start at 5 years old or something in quarter midgets or outlaw carts and stuff like that. So what was your first interaction with racing, and how did you kind of, start your journey?
Yeah, so my dad ran modifieds and late models, way back in the 80s and 90s and stuff. And he actually quit the year that I was born. So I never got to watch my dad race, and I never got to go to the track. And then my uncle actually raced out micros and at Port City and everything. So I went to the races, and then when I was 6 or 7, I wanted to race. So my dad bought me a junior sprint and whatnot, and then went to a couple practice days, and I ended up actually getting upside down on a practice day. So I told my parents then that I didn't want to race, and, went and played ball sports and whatnot. And then I got back into it. I think I was 10, and I told my dad at the shootout we were watching that year that I wanted to race, and he ended up buying a car that night, and we took it home from the shootout and then raced, when I was 10, 11, 12, 13, and then was, fortunate enough to get in the midget at Keith Kunz Motorsports at 14. And then here I am today. So yeah, a lot of people don't know that I didn't start when I was younger. I actually only have 6 years of racing under my belt, which is pretty cool.
That is cool. Did he ever try to promote you to race something that wasn't open wheel? Because you got started in micro, and you said he used to race mods. I guess that's open wheel and late models.
Yeah, he never really did. He didn't really push me to race, but the moment I wanted to race, he was all about it. So that was really cool, how he didn't push me. But then again, when I told him I wanted to race, he was very excited, of course, just like any dad would be when their kid's racing. So that was cool. But I think when I was younger, I just grew up around the micro scene and everything. And then he kind of drifted to the open wheel side. So you could honestly get started at a younger age, I feel like, on the open wheel side with junior sprints and micros and whatnot. And then, like, with the late models and everything, I feel like you would run like crates or something when you're like 14, and then basically you're already behind if you want to go to, Keith Kunz Motorsports or NASCAR or anything.
So getting started in micros, you talked about, kind of getting those first laps younger and then quitting and then getting back into it. What was the local scene like for you? What were some of the racetracks you were running in Oklahoma and the competition levels?
Yeah, I personally feel like Port City is probably the hardest local track to win at. I feel like it could compare to what you guys would know would be like Red Bluff. Like it is, I feel like Port City is the Red Bluff of micros. And Oklahoma just has so much talent. I feel like that a lot of people kind of overlook and everything. And, um, you know, it's cool sometimes, but then again, you can get stuck at Port City and then never really show your talent. So me and my dad and everyone tried to travel a little bit more. So we were in this series called Now 600. It's Terry Maddox promotes it. It's the guy who kind of promotes ASCS National Series too. So he kind of started a little micro deal, and honestly didn't get that many cars when he first started, and we kind of stuck with him the first couple of years, and then now they just had a race last week that got 120 cars. So that was pretty cool at Port City to see how much he's growed. And, for me being the first person to kind of stick with him, that was really cool. But traveled a little bit, and then ran Port City as much as we could. They had like the Donnie Ray Crawford, the P. Fraser, and a couple other 2 to 3 day shows, almost every month that a lot of people would come to, and that were, prestige to win. And then I think the latter years of my micro like sprint career, Port City actually closed down. So everyone kind of drifted to a track that was 3 hours away, I-44 Speedway. And it's like Port City, just probably a little bit bigger, I would say, and just, kind of teaches you to keep your momentum up, for instance, not be like a bull ring racer. So, that was cool, but, it always sucks when, a track closes down that was at prestige. So, but luckily, Shane Stewart takes care of it now, which is really, really cool. And he can kind of, guide people in the right direction, if their parents, kind of don't know what the racing scene is like, and he can, have really good connections to get your kid to the next level.
So I said it a little bit earlier in the episode. One of the main reasons having you on is just like trying to find a micro driver to talk about the micro scene, because we're kart kids. This was our pathway to, trying to move up through the ranks, and you were right in the center of it in Oklahoma. So is that what you would say, about micros? You talked about just the competition levels and the different types of racetracks, then also the Now 600 series, which seems to be very popular and has so many races on the schedule. Is what is producing these drivers to, go on and race with KKM like you are, or, even getting into wing sprint cars at a young age and then going on to, kind of really making a career out of the sport of racing?
Yeah, I really do. And like as of right now, like last year, I think it was me, Cannon, Kaylee, Brenham is a micro guy, Brian is a micro guy, and like right now, all of Keith's drivers all grew up running micros. And I feel like when, Tanner Carrick, Ryan Robinson, Holly Sheldon, and all those people were running for Keith, it was mainly outlaw car guys. So, I really think it just kind of drifts around almost to, because I feel like California is really big on outlaw carts. Like their outlaw carts are bigger than their micros, and then you got like out here in Oklahoma, and people don't even know what outlaw carts are. So it's everything about micros. So I feel like it's just where you grew up, and definitely kind of how hard you want to push yourself. And I feel like if you race anything and you're good enough, or you get your name out there, it really doesn't matter where you grow up, as long as you find the competition and the right tracks to go to push yourself to be better.
Have you had the opportunity to turn a lap in an open 500 outlaw cart?
I have not. I've actually talked to Carson Souza quite a bit about running one, but I've actually not. I've been to Millbridge and almost ran one of Bundy's outlaw carts, but I actually didn't end up. But I think it'd be really cool. I feel like, any laps in anything does not hurt at all to just kind of progress and be open-minded and getting in and hopping in anything.
Yeah, we got to get you out to Red Bluff definitely next season. That'd be cool to see you turn some laps there.
Yeah, Red Bluff might not be the place to be for the first time, but I would definitely give it a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. So moving on kind of from, getting started with Now 600, you run that for years, and didn't you win a couple championships, right?
Yeah, I think I won 2 restrictor championships and then moved up to A class, which is like a stock class, and then ended up picking up a championship in that.
So that's great. So you ran the micro deal. You got into with KKM at 14 years old. What does that look like, getting hooked up, with the top tier midget team, and then, leading in that direction of, making a career out of racing?
Yeah, I truly didn't know that I was going to be racing for KKM when I was 14. Like, it's just something that you dream of course, is running for KKM. And I was very fortunate enough to be one of the younger kids that he's ever took in and kind of took a chance on. So that was pretty cool. But again, you're in the best stuff, so it's usually not the car's fault, it's the driver's fault. So that's something that you have to kind of take up upon yourself, is when you get out of the car and kind of talk to the crew guys, like, it's usually your fault, and you just need to learn from it, which is, there's nothing wrong for that. That's, part of Keith Kunz Motorsports is to develop people. And I feel like that's kind of what we're on the road to now is we're competing, I feel like, for a win almost every time we hit the track. And that's something cool to look back as, 3 years ago, I barely made the Power I shows. So, I feel like I've progressed very well, and that's just part of how good Keith Kunz Motorsports is, where he can push kids at a younger age to be really, really good and can compete with people like Justin Grant, KTJ, T-Mez at a really young age.
Yeah. So you mentioned there most of the time it's not the car's fault. Does that actually give you a boost going into the race knowing that you've got a great setup actually most of the time? So does that like clear your mind thinking all I got to do is drive it now?
Yes, it is. It's very easy, when you don't have to realize like, the car's going to be this or the car's going to be loose or tight or whatnot. Usually it's 95% of the time it is going to be wicked fast every time you hit the track, and you can usually maneuver, wherever you need to. So that's really mind clearing, I guess, like you said. So, to have that, it's in your back corner, and to drive one of those cars is extremely, I wouldn't say it's easy because you have to get up on the wheel, but it brings your confidence down where you don't have to be on the wheel every single lap. You can almost take a little bit of breathers.
Yeah, I know it kind of relates, kind of not going out in an Outlaw Car Red Bluff for qualifying. And I set it up. I'm thinking, is this setup even going to work before I even think about turning the wheel? So that's pretty cool. And I think you might be the same way with Jimmy setting up your stuff too. So
yeah, in my Outlaw card, it's similar. And then also we have a crew chief on the sprint car. So it is nice, having that feeling going out like, we're at least going to be close. And then, I have to do my part, to make it go fast. So in your early days with KKM, kind of, I guess you could say showing up to the shop for the first time or those first couple interactions with the team, were you working directly with Keith, or was that like, maybe they assigned you said they have a lot of crew members, one specific crew chief, and this is like your crew chief and driver coach, or, because they have obviously a lot of resources there. So who were the people that you were kind of working with when you first got started with them?
Yeah, so 3 years ago when I first got into it, Keith and Big Al were the two crew chiefs of the two trailers. So there's like a black trailer and then there's a blue trailer that they call them. So usually Keith at first, takes you for, probably he took me for a full year, and he's the one that kind of gets you used to everything, and is sort of a driver coach. And then Jay Drake is a really good driver coach, as you can tell, all the history that he's had in midget racing. So yeah, all the newer guys, usually get to go to Keith. And then, to be honest, now, like last year, Keith kind of stepped away from it about right in the middle of the season, and he was just kind of watching over everything. He didn't even turn a wrench on a car. I mean, of course, the crew chiefs could go up there and ask him, whatever questions he needed to, or whatnot, and he would lead them in the right direction. But he honestly didn't make a call on the car about halfway through the season last year, and this year he hasn't made a call yet on the cars. And especially with the micro stuff, he's usually with them now. So it's a lot different, but I feel like, the younger kids are still good, and the crew chiefs that he has with him are top notch. They're really good at what they do. And that's another thing to talk about is like the crew guys are really young too. I think the oldest one is probably 25 or something. So to have
they're
that
kind of learning
relationship.
with you.
Oh yeah, they're learning with us a lot. Like Jarrett Martin, it was his first time ever wrenching on a car was last year, and he picked up a USAC win. I think like 12 Power I wins with Buddy is his first time. So they're learning just as much as we are, and it's kind of cool to be able to build that relationship with somebody almost as young as you or the same age as you, and to be that successful is really cool. Is really cool.
That is crazy. Another thing to kind of talk about with midget racing, the competition level is just on another level right now. You're driving for a top tier team, but there's also now other top tier teams kind of, I guess, trying to replicate the KKM format of having multiple cars and multiple drivers and crew guys. So, what's that like, every single night, whether it's USAC or Power Eye, there's other teams that, you guys all have very similar equipment. And then at some point, it just comes down to who has the best night and runs the best race.
Yeah, midget racing, I feel like I've actually talked to Keith and Pete about this, is right now they think it's the toughest it has ever been. Just because, like you said, everyone has the same stuff. Everyone has Toyotas, spikes, bullets. It really doesn't matter. And everyone has the same motors and everything. So it's hard to really, find the edge like that. So it's just, comes down to if your driver can really talk to your crew chief and get your car, pretty much perfect. So sometimes you hit it and then sometimes you don't. But that's another thing that I feel like we have really good confidence in is how good our cars are. We don't have to worry about that. We can just, tell the crew chief what we think. And he's really, really good usually about getting the car where you need it. And he never second guesses and we never second guess what he's doing. And I feel like that's where it comes to be really successful. And that's why they're a top tier team.
So one of the main things you kind of touched on earlier, you don't have your first USAC win yet. You've had a couple seconds. You've been super close. But one of those wins you did pick up was actually last year at I-44. You picked up your first POWRi National win. Can you kind of talk about that night and, getting the monkey off your back with your first big midget win?
Yeah, so that was actually a 3-day weekend. I think we went to Port on Friday maybe or Thursday, and we ran I-44 Friday. So the first night I-44, I think I led 28 laps, and then Cannon got by me on a restart and actually pretty much stole my first win away. So I was very upset about that. And then of course the next night, I think me and Buddy might have started 8th or 10th. And there was no yellows, and I think I took the lead around lap 15 away from another Keith Kunz Motorsports teammate. I feel like we're always racing each other, but I took the lead away from him, and then, like I said, no yellows, so we got to lap traffic, and that's always, extremely nerve-wracking, and sometimes it bites you when you're the leader because you don't know where to go. So I feel like I made pretty good moves through lap traffic, and then, of course, Buddy, I think he slid a lap car going into turn 1 on the white flag lap, and I thought he was sliding me. So I was like, oh crap, I got to get going here. And he actually was right on my bumper. I feel like the last 5 or so laps. So to finally get my monkey off, the monkey off my back there, especially in my hometown, was really, really cool. And, for being there and then seeing all the people cheer for me was pretty cool. And, just got to get that first USAC win now.
That'll be cool, especially when it comes. I'll be watching for sure.
Yeah. So through all this this midget success and even your journey just starting in micros, you said your dad raced. How has your family been following along with you through this? We do some of our research for these podcasts, and that was one of the things I heard you talk about in another interview. Is your family, goes to 95% of your races and is always there, and that's a similar situation for me. So how is it, every single time you're at the dirt track to have your parents there supporting you?
Yeah, it's extremely, I feel like it's almost easier on you because you don't have to, worry about getting to a hotel or whatnot by yourself. And you have your mom there. And I feel like I'm, fairly young. So it's nice to have her there and everything. And this year has honestly been probably the first couple of times that I haven't had them there with my mom having to stay home because my sister's getting married. And that's another thing that's really tough about racing is I'm going to end up missing her wedding. So that's really weird almost to kind of miss your sibling's wedding. But thankfully, she understands and my parents aren't, mad or anything. And they can kind of talk her through it that he wants to, have a career in racing. And that's just what you have to sacrifice sometimes. So, yeah, this year I feel like they haven't came a lot so far. But I feel like, after that wedding passes, they'll be right back where they can. And, we'll be clicking off races.
That's super neat. Yeah, racing's definitely a family sport. And, I know, as you get to different levels, a lot of drivers you see, they're just kind of by themselves, but it's always fun to have them there supporting you. The next and kind of one of our final segments here, what's next for Daison Pursley? What's the rest of the year look like for you guys and your run with Keith Kunz Motorsports?
Yeah, so definitely, the end of the year, we'll get through USAC and POWRi. And unfortunately, the USAC and POWRi, some of the races are on top of each other. So I think KKM will end up, splitting up like they have years in the past where 3 drivers will go to POWRi and then the other 3 will go to USAC. So, that sucks to look at championship aspects, to try to win both or try to get top 5 in POWRi and USAC since you'll be able, or you're going to miss 3 or 5 of those races no matter which way you go. But, finish off those and try to finish in the USAC points, top 5 or even, fight for a championship, I feel like is definitely not out of the picture with how consistent we've been. But I feel like you can really see if you're going to be in the championship points after Indiana Midget Week because you have so many races in a row. You can either gain a lot of points or definitely lose a lot of points if you have a bad week. So that'll be tough to look at that. And then hopefully I feel like we have a decent time off, I feel like, at the end of Illinois Midget Week. So I don't know if Keith will get the sprint car out and I'll be able to go make my first couple laps in the sprint car again, which we did last year. And that was another really cool experience to do is, hop in a sprint car and it happens to be a 410. So for my first time doing that, that was pretty wild.
Yeah, that was one thing I actually had on my notes to ask you about. So I know was that with MOA? You made that 410 debut?
I made the 410 debut at Attica and Fremont, was my first time. And then my third and final time last year was with MOA.
Okay, so what is it about, midget racers being so encouraged to go run wing stuff? I know that was one thing I've heard with Buddy and my friend Logan Seavey. Like every time, they've kind of been in this the midget program, they're really heavily encouraged to go run wing cars because it helps you so much with the midgets. What is it about that those kind of correlate together?
I feel like wing cars are, they're bigger and they have a big motor and everything. So I feel like carrying wing speed, like corner speed and whatnot, helps you in a non-wing car. And then of course, when you get into a 410 sprint car at Attica or Fremont or, Eldora, wherever you go race, it slows the midget stuff down. So your reflexes don't have to be as fast. So if you get used to running a 410 sprint car like Buddy has, you're almost dropping down a level when you get back into midgets. So that's something I feel like I don't have enough connections as of right now. Say for instance, as Buddy does, where he can, call somebody and he can go run their sprint car when we get rained out or even have an off weekend. So, maybe one day I'll find those connections and be able to do that. But right now, of course, our main focus is on the midget side.
That's some great insight. One of our final questions, you're in with Keith Kunz Motorsports right now. You're doing the midgets. We talked about wing sprint cars, but what's the next step for you? I know you're probably dirt racing, making a career out of it is one of those, but where do you see yourself trying to go after you run midgets, or maybe the midgets are even more of a long-term thing as well?
I really, definitely NASCAR is everyone's dream, for instance, when you're first starting, when you're younger, but when I'm, of course I'm hooked up with Toyota now and you've watched Christopher and Kyle do it, and go all the way to the top. So that's something I feel like is not out of reach, for me. And it's just definitely something that I have to work hard for the next couple of years to try to put myself in that position to be good on pavement and to get those opportunities on pavement. But, yet again, if I basically just suck on pavement and not good at it, then, I'll be more than happy to go, make a career out of non-wing sprint cars or, I feel like everyone's dream is to run the World of Outlaws too. So that's something that I would love to do. And if I was able to do that one day, I'd be extremely thankful.
Absolutely.
That's great. Well, we're going to be following along with your season on Flow Racing. I know they cover a bunch of the races you guys are at. So we'll be watching. Last thing, do you have a couple of your social medias maybe you want to shout out? Where can people kind of follow along with your racing?
Yeah, cool. Just, follow Daison Pursley on Twitter, on Instagram, and you can even follow along on Facebook. And that's, all I got.
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining. Have a great rest of your day and good luck with the rest of your season.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
Well, a phenomenal interview from Daison Pursley. I think I said it kind of towards the beginning, but I've never actually met Daison, but we've kind of private messaged back and forth. When I was going to be at Creek County last year, he's close to Creek County in Oklahoma where he lives, and we just missed each other, but I've ran with him plenty of times on iRacing. It was so interesting to kind of hear about a little background on Keith Kunz Motorsports from, what it's like to be a driver for them. So many resources they have from driver coaches to, just working with Keith Kunz and then all of their individual crew chiefs. I thought that was just awesome to hear about.
Yeah, that was a great interview, and I know this is something kind of funny, as me and you were a little bit nervous, I think you could say, before the interview, because we hadn't done a face-to-face one.
Yeah.
But right after, me and Tanner were like, that was awesome. And I personally think the face-to-face interviews are a lot better just because you get to see the person, you get to talk to them, and you really, I don't know, I just think you really understand what they're saying a lot more, but it's super cool to hear his way of coming up through the ranks. He mentioned he didn't start as early as a lot of kids are starting now, like I did and you did. So that's pretty cool to see that he's, I guess you could say, like he mentioned, one of the veterans at Keith Kunz, and he's only 16 years old or somewhere in there.
Yeah,
so
he's very young. A lot of his teammates are, much younger than him, and that goes to show, how kids are kind of getting into midget racing around the age of 13, 14 years old, and they're able to run with Power Eye. And then, they hit the age limit to run with USAC. And also that just shows where midget racing's at as a whole.
Yeah.
It's such a crazy form of dirt track racing. I haven't been to a lot of midget races in person because they're just not super big on the West Coast. We have the Focus midgets, but those are much slower, but they do draw good car counts up here in the Northwest. But man, I watched them a little bit down at Hanford when we were there a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I look forward, hopefully when we're in the Midwest, maybe a couple of our sprint car shows, have the midgets as, you could say, a support class or, the class with us. But it'd be awesome to see more of those races in person.
Yeah, the USAC series seems really cool. If you could have the opportunity and you were going to start, would you rather start in USAC or Power Eye?
I think you'd want to get some laps in Power Eye first because Power Eye has good competition, it seems like. Yeah. But, USAC, you're just going to get more elite teams or all the big teams, I guess, with multiple cars, where Power Eye seems like maybe it still has a couple of like single or two car teams that are more just, trying to get laps or just from a little bit of a different area of the country compared to some of the USAC shows, I guess you could say. But, talking to Daison, that was so great to hear his story and, even talked about, flipping in a restricted micro at a young age. I think it was a junior sprint.
It was a junior sprint, and he said, I'm done with that. I'm going to go play baseball.
And then how his paths kind of crossed to getting back into dirt racing, and now he's on his way to making a career out of it. So that was awesome to talk to Daison. I think into the next segment for the show, talk a little bit about our weekends. Carly ran the limited sprint at Coos Bay, and you said you had a couple purchases that you made, recently. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So everyone knows the red Mustang that I had that we got pulled over in. It goes in limp mode, and it was getting so bad, and I was over it. So I was like, hey, this thing isn't going to last much longer. So I told my parents we're going to get rid of it. So we took it to the dealership. And my sponsor, actually, Crown Motors, had purchased it back, which was awesome. And then there's a car I've been wanting for a long time. It's the 1987 Toyota Mr2 Mark 1, and that's what we got. And we also got an 86 with the car. So I got two Toyota Mr2s. You got to ride in it today, too. The Space Coupe is what we call it.
Yeah.
They're manual, so I had to learn a little bit with that. When I drove the late model, that's when I learned manual. So I guess with the late model, you shift at a lot higher RPMs and stuff. And this thing is like, it's lurching because I'm not giving it enough juice. So I picked that thing up, and, it's for the condition it is in for an 87. It's a phenomenal condition. So I just dropped a video on it on today. So a lot of people have already seen it by then, but I can't wait to upgrade that thing, and hopefully it turns into a pretty nice restored show vehicle.
Yeah, and that'll be the main thing, taking you back and forth as you come up, shoot the podcast, travel with us, for the sprint car season. Carly, though, had a phenomenal weekend. She ran Cottage Grove on Friday night, ran Coos Bay on Saturday. This was like the Interstate Sprint Car Series season opener, and those vlogs just turned out great. It's kind of funny, when I'm not there racing, I have so many emotions about like going to a racetrack and not racing just because I haven't done it much. But, going there and not racing, I can make, I don't want to say much better content, but you just have so much time on your hands.
Right.
I mean, I don't have to go to a driver's meeting. I don't have to, there's just little things I don't have to do. I don't have to watch the racetrack as much.
Yeah.
I'm not going up to watch every sprint car heat race because, I want to see how everyone else runs. I try to watch a little bit for Carly, obviously, but, if Carly's in heat race 1 and we watch that, I'm headed back to the trailer. I'm not there to watch everything else. And so anyway, it's just a different perspective being at the racetrack. Another thing, I hate to admit it, but I eat a lot more. It's crazy. Like on race day when I'm driving, I don't eat much because if I'm nervous or whatever. But when we're race day comes around and don't have much to do, you find yourself being a little bored and you eat more. So that's a fun fact. Other than that, though,
I was gonna say, do you think you get more nervous or less nervous or as nervous as, when you're there with Carly or when you're actually racing yourself?
This weekend I found myself super relaxed. I don't know what it was. I think part of it was because I was able to do things that I do really enjoy, which was like trying to create as much content out of the weekend, not only in the video, but like, just trying new things. And I actually have this on my notes, but for example, one of those trying to take some pictures, when you're there with us, you take some really great action shots. And I'm like, what, why not give that a try?
Yeah.
And props to every photographer ever because it's way harder than it looks. I tried to take some photos and a bunch of them turned out blurry or not in the right focus, or I probably didn't even have the right settings on.
Yeah.
But, that was one of the things. And then also just trying different things that I can't do because I have less time on my hands when I'm behind the wheel. Like I didn't execute it, but I know what I have to do next time I'm at Coos Bay. I'm going to do a backstretch cam. So I already have it where I can set it up. I tried to do it for Carly, but my mount just didn't work. I didn't have the proper equipment.
Yeah.
But I just think, different things like that, I have all the time in the world. Right when Carly, goes out, I can run over to the backstretch, turn on the camera, and, video and get all the footage I still get. So that's one of the main things. But watching Carly, I really haven't been getting as nervous. The biggest thing is you probably hear me yell a little bit over the video because I'm so emotional and in it for her. Because I feel like I'm watching a younger version of myself, I guess, learn the sprint car.
Well, it's like, I think a good thing about it is like you start to watch her develop and you go to the races with her and you start to have, not that you didn't have confidence in her at first, but you start to have confidence in the fact that she knows what she's doing when she shows up and she's going to do her job. Whereas I know, like, when I ran up in Hayfork, my dad, I could tell was like, you might know what you're doing, but you don't. But like, I always know, like, when we went to Arizona to race the 410, I didn't doubt that you can drive the car, but I was like, we're racing with the biggest guys now.
I agree.
So I was like, it's just like, and then when we start to go run, more often, it's like, it's just another day at the track for me now. But when we went and did that, I was like a little nervous. But
yeah, actually, that's a great point. And it's a totally different perspective. It goes down to the little things that I'm just not as used to doing because, like I said, I'm usually the one in the car. Like even, where Coos Bay was at, where we park, you have to push Carly back. Every single time she goes out, just getting used to like pushing the car back. Yeah. I know that seems so petty, but that's serious, like something little. But, what you said, the perspective of, watching the races and me having absolutely zero control of what happens. Yeah. And I think I have more fun, even in these first couple of races, watching Carly's progress because the progress is so clear. Sometimes when you're behind the wheel, you don't see your progress because you're so looking at the little things. Like I find myself pretty hard on myself, like, oh my gosh, I made that mistake on lap 7, but what about laps 8 through 30 that were perfect? Or I guess, that's an example. But, I can see Carly's progress so clearly in these first couple of races and things to work on as well. And the biggest thing is just trying to be that driver coach for her because I told her, I was like, when I was running the sprint car, I didn't have, really a person that close to me, that had driven before to ask a lot of questions. So, at least she can, I'm not going to say I know everything, but, I've been in the same spot as her, driving a limited at Cottage Grove and Coos Bay. So that's an interesting perspective. And then also what you said, just having the confidence in the driver, it kind of gave me more of an appreciation for like you, my sister, Carly, my parents, my crew chief, Roger, because, like, for example, going and run that 410 race, always being in the seat, I can only imagine sometimes, especially if I didn't do something right or I was way off the pace, it's just like you're kind of just sitting there in the stands with that look. It's
not really that for me. Like, oh my God, you're so much slower. I don't really care. I mean, you could be the slowest car on track. I still have confidence in your driving. It's more of just you're stepping up to the big dogs. And it's like, I can imagine your shoes. Yeah. I would be scared list, to be honest. I would be nervous. All right. So that's just kind of what it boils down to is like, I get nervous. I'm like, well, here we are.
And maybe that's not even the right words. I guess what I'm trying to say is like, when you're in the stands and you're watching the driver, it's easy to kind of pick apart the mistakes maybe, or just little things are like, oh my gosh, why are they running that line? Or why are they doing this and that? But then it's easy for me to remember back, like, okay, I've been in her shoes before. Right. Like, I've done all these things wrong. I've flown off the track. I've been the slowest guy on the track. So it's just it's cool to kind of have both different perspectives, and it gives me more of an appreciation on both sides of what it's like. You know. So I have a couple more notes on my phone that I'm gonna pull up because I had a couple of things specifically from night number 2. To touch on night number 1 real quick, Carly was running third at one point. She pulled the 3. She wasn't very good at the beginning of the night, and to touch on that, the racetrack was insanely slick. It rained a bunch, and then actually they were able to pack it in, so we were able to race, and the moisture was maybe just an inch under the surface. Like, it was soaking wet, but they were able to get it packed in enough to where, maybe the moisture would just come back at the begining, or at the end of the night, I should say, because Brian Crockett, really good on track prep. We need to get Brian on the podcast soon. That's our goal.
I think we're kicking that around with him.
Yeah. So, but he's really good at track prep up at Cottage Grove and has done so much in dirt track racing. But he knew that if he got too much water on top of the track after that rain, it was going to be wide open, 0% all night, you could say. Just absolute playing in the mud. So he did his job on track prep. It was super slick at the beginning of the night, and Carly just kind of didn't run the proper line. And I tried to explain that to her in video her in qualifying. So we studied that. She got better in the heat race, ran second in the heat, pulled the 3 pill, fell back to 5th early in the A, but actually put on a charge back to 3rd. And then, fell back to 4th towards the end and then started trying stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think she panicked is the word, but she just, wanted to get away from the line that she was running, and she ended up just getting caught in the slick and spinning out. So we talked about that. That's just part of learning.
That's development, just feeling out the track. And I think as a driver, you could look back and think like, oh, that was so stupid. But at the same time, you got to think, well, at least I know now.
I think
you got to move around.
Learning comes, what I like to say in sprint cars, learning comes in some of your, I guess you could say, lowest moments.
Right.
You made this big mistake. Like I've made mistakes on the track where maybe I missed a final transfer spot, or, I made a mistake in qualifying and I was 8th quick instead of top of the charts. Yeah. But those mistakes are where you really learn what to do and what not to do. A prime example, I was trying to go for my first limited win, and it took me, a season and a half or 2 seasons almost. And I remember there's this one night at Metford, our local track, just about 10 minutes away.
Yeah.
I'm going to win tonight. I am the fastest car on the track. I had a good draw. I won my heat race. I think I pulled the 1 or 2 in the dash. I won the dash. I'm like, no one's beating us. And it was their biggest race of the year, $2,000 to win.
Yeah.
And I'm rolling the bottom. I'm just cruising on the bottom. Like, I got these guys covered. All of a sudden, I get my doors blown off on a line we've never seen at the racetrack before, which was the top at Southern Oregon. Usually it's not there. And from there on, I learned that the top side, I just learned about searching. And that's like that race specifically. I remember all the lessons I learned. I ended up running second, which was so disappointing.
Yeah.
But like I said, all the stuff I learned. So that's kind of what I felt for Carly, in that moment of spinning out. It sucked, but you just regroup and you move on to the next night. So Carly ran the Coos Bay Speedway then the second night. I think she was scored 10th after Cottage Grove. But on my phone, I had a couple of notes just for Coos Bay because it's such an interesting racetrack.
I think it's honestly one of my favorite facilities.
Absolutely.
Because it's a drag strip in front of it, and I think the cool part is it's coastal. It's on the coast.
Yes.
So they're like it's in a valley, but with like
in like a
redwoods and
clearing.
stuff. It's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I had in my notes. I wanted to talk about the facility because we haven't talked about it yet here on the podcast. But the Coos Bay Speedway, it totally screams the Pacific Northwest. Like, that's where I'm from, Oregon, Washington, that's the area of the Pacific Northwest. And, just kind of what we have here, you mentioned coastal. Coos Bay is, like, just a couple miles from the ocean. You can, like, smell it, when you're there at the Speedway. So it's cool. You're in a little clearing. You have the drag strip. You have the dirt track. And the stands are, like, right in the side of a hill.
Yeah.
And you can actually pack a good amount of people there. And it's easy to go up to those grandstands to watch the races, or they have the pit stands in a lot of area in the pit area. And also at the end of the drag strip is where a lot of the sprint cars can park, right? On a, a paved runway. So that's one of the things about the Coos Bay Speedway that I had down. Another thing about the Coos Bay Speedway that I thought was so interesting, and this kind of goes back to Brian Crockett. So, that racetrack, it's not the best. The facility's really nice, but it's just kind of flat and it banks off. So throughout the night, I was putting down notes on certain things to mention in the podcast so I don't forget.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, man, this place could be so cool because on Saturday, it kind of got one lane. It wasn't the raciest. We've seen it like that before. We've seen nights randomly out of nowhere where it'll be super cool.
Yeah.
Wide, or two lanes, wide racetrack, slick. You can run as far up on the banking as possible, and then, you can putt around the very bottom, but it all just depends. It has to be perfect, and it has to be sandy in certain spots to take away grip and add grip. But I asked Brian Crockett, who runs the Interstate Sprint Car Series for the limited class, I said, hey, man, why do you think they have this place flatten off? Why don't racetracks, always have the banking at least consistently far up the racetrack?
Yeah.
Because the racetrack is this wide, and you can only use this much of it.
Yeah.
And it's funny, he goes, I was thinking the same thing, and I asked the promoter, I said, hey, why don't you, add a little bit of banking in this thing, so we can really get the racing better? He said, we have to have a place to run our water truck. And so I thought that was interesting because they always are watering Coos Bay every single time, 5 or 6 times before the races, and a lot of times that's why it's hooked up. But I thought that was something to definitely note down. We got to have a place to run our water truck. So that was interesting. And then the last thing from Coos Bay that was actually pretty funny because I mentioned, not being behind the wheel of a race car. I have a lot more time on my hands. And I was joking there, right where we're pitted, you can walk up to the grandstands, and they had this huge hill, and all the kids that were there, because it was bike night, so they gave away like 60 bikes. That was awesome. That drew in a huge crowd. And all these kids all night long, I'll play a couple clips while I'm talking about it, but they were rolling down the hill. I'm talking like wrestling each other, like full on. And I was joking like, hey, I don't have anything else better to do. I should just go roll down the hill with with those kids. But that was a couple interesting things about the Coos Bay Speedway. Carly ran 4th from 9th. She missed the redraw. Qualified really good, though. I mean, for going to a new track, I was worried. You know, you talked about having confidence in the driver. I had confidence in Carly that she was going to do good, but I wasn't sure how hard she was going to drive the race car.
Yeah.
But I honestly shouldn't have doubted her for a second, because Cottage Grove was a whole 180 from the week before. You know, she was flying. Wasn't afraid to step on the gas, I should say.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that was Coos Bay, 9th to 4th, first sprint car top 5. That was pretty cool for Carly. So that was our weekend with Carly. Next up, we have the Peter Murphy Classic this Friday and Saturday. Friday's at Hanford with the King of Thunder sprint cars with the 410. And then Saturday is an actual King of the West race, which pays $11,000. I think that's the highest paying 410 race. And actually, I take that back. There's one more that's higher paying, but $11,000, that's a lot. That's a lot of money on the line at Tulare. And my first time running Tulare in a 410, so that should be interesting. The next time Carly will be behind the wheel might be the following weekend. I think that's the 22nd. It would be up in Washington, or the weekend after that for sure. She'll be in the car at Cottage Grove for a doubleheader. So to wrap up this episode, though, Bennett, do you want to hit us with the fan question?
Yeah, so I was thinking this week, I'm going to take over the fan question, and I think this is a great topic that me and Tanner can both touch on. I'm one to go on social media and look at all the NASCAR updates throughout the day, because I love watching NASCAR. I love all the top tiers of NASCAR. And I see people that comment this, and I get so fired up over it, and I don't even attempt to comment back, because I know half the people that comment about this are idiots anyways. And I'm going to say that because I think they are, because whatever they say is how NASCAR sucks. NASCAR's this. NASCAR needs to do this. Like, just enjoy the series for one moment. But anyways, what I'm getting at is Kyle Busch, our favorite driver, dropping ranks to run the truck series. And not just Kyle Busch. I'm talking any Cup driver. And I think we both agree that Cup drivers can drop ranks, and it's great for the sport. And I'll give my first reasons why, and then you can go ahead and add yours. But I personally think Kyle Busch is a team owner, a driver, and a developer of the sport at this point. So if he's going to go, and if his team is not producing the numbers or the wins like he wants, as we've seen on his social media and his interviews, if he's not happy about it, he's going to voice his opinion. Well, what do you have to do? Well, you got to fix your team and your series. So Kyle needs to drop down and run his equipment that he owns, and maybe he can give pointers to some of the kids and tell them how to drive that package of truck or whatnot. You know what I mean? But the people that comment and say, oh, he's just cherry picking to win. Well, look at what Kyle's doing. Kyle is running because, one, he loves racing at his heart, and two, he's helping these drivers, kids. He talked about talking with John Hunter and going back and forth with wins and joking with him and whatnot. But not only that, is all these other drivers like Sheldon Creed, the past champion, and John Hunter Nemechek, all these kids and guys, Matt Crafton, that are in the truck series, they have just as good as equipment as Kyle. And I think you can't always say someone's cherry picking, because when they step down and run the same equipment, maybe these other drivers need to step up to the plate, because he's not just getting everything handed to him. If you watch the race, it's not like he's out there just walking the dogs, eating McDonald's while he's driving. He's racing hard. And it makes me so mad when people are like, oh, he's just cherry picking to win because he's got a big ego. And I'm like, you know nothing about the sport if that's what you think he's doing. And I think you could probably agree.
Yeah, and I'm not going to lie. I don't get as fired up in the sense, just because I don't know. I haven't watched a lot of NASCAR lately, but this is one topic I
get fired up because so many people rip on NASCAR nowadays. Yeah. Like, it sucks. And I'm like,
people need to just, like you said, enjoy the sport.
Right.
And so many people, even in dirt track racing.
What did Peter Murphy say? He's developing the dirt racing on the West Coast.
Yes.
NASCAR's trying to develop. Now, that's trial and error. The one lug nut thing is horrible. I think it's the dumbest idea. Their next gen cars, though, are more stock, and I think it's an awesome idea.
But on the topic you brought up of, drivers dropping down to lower series, I'm all for it. Obviously, I'm a big Kyle Busch fan, so I'm kind of biased. But, I mean, I think you touched on, everything. One, it helps his drivers. It shows where his race team is at. Yeah. And I can only imagine what it's like to drive for Kyle Busch, because he will literally call out his drivers on Twitter, if they don't have the performance or if they make the mistakes. But that goes to show where his equipment is at and where his teams are. They expect perfection.
And not only that, too, I think it was Martinsville, and I believe it was Harrison Burton. Not to bring up anything bad, but the emotions are so raw in NASCAR is when he won. He's, what he said, F Kyle Busch, because Kyle called him out and said, I expect you to win in my equipment. And so he did. And, obviously he shouldn't have said that or whatnot, but it's just, I don't like that people always get mad at someone helping to try to develop the sport. And you know what? Also, if Kyle Busch is going to set the record wins in the Truck Series, where do you think he started? He started in the Truck Series, right? Yeah. He worked his way up. So why not come down and break a damn record? Why are you going to limit someone?
And I think also some people make it seem like it's so easy. It goes to show really how talented Kyle is and all these other drivers that, drop down and run Xfinity races. And also, if they have that opportunity, they should be taking it, because it's more track time for them to, learn things that will help them in the Cup race, later in the weekend. But, like you said, just get that chance to run more races, develop equipment for other teams, and add to the excitement of the Truck Series, because you're not just watching it for the regulars, you're watching it to see how the NASCAR guys go up, and it's cool when we see an upset victory of a truck kid beating a NASCAR veteran.
Absolutely. Like Matt Crafton, like all these guys that Kyle Busch drops down to race, like Sheldon Creed, Matt Crafton, all these guys, Ben Rhodes, I believe, still is in the Truck Series. They're so fast, they're good. It's not like he's just handed the win. So all these people, I'm convinced, don't even watch half the race. They just watch the Instagram updates. So my advice to you, if you're that person, go watch the dang race. But other than that,
that's our NASCAR rant.
That's just my one rant, and I'm sure we'll have more. And I could go on and on for days about people that are just dumb on social media that don't know what they're talking about. But I love NASCAR, and I'm a big fan of it, and I'm a big fan of the top tier of motorsports. And when a top tier sport tries to evolve because the people ask for it, and then what they do is wrong again, it just gets me fired up.
But it happens. There's so many keyboard warriors, but that is our NASCAR rant for the day, and that's how we're going to wrap up today's episode. So much fun stuff that we talked about, including our interview with Daison Pursley, how he's been doing with KKM lately and what his 2021 season looks like and beyond. We talked about Bennett's new car, talked about Carly's weekend between Cottage Grove and Coos Bay, and what our future looks like and our next month of racing. So we will see you guys all in episode number 18 of Off the Track next Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. We're signing off.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are watching Off the Track, and it is time to drop the hammer.